What's up, Pitt fans? Noah Hiles, Chris Carter here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You haven't seen us do one of these for basketball yet.
No, we have not.
But I figure this is probably the time to start doing them, right? Football's done, and it's a backyard brawl. So we got the good, bad, ugly post-game recap. Pitt takes down West Virginia. What was the final?
80-63.
80-63. I believe that's right. That's why I asked him. And we'll get right into it. The good, I mean, there was a lot to like in this Pitt win, but I think the good is pretty easy if I get first pick. I'm going to go with the guy who had a career high in points and set a school record with 9 3-pointers. His name is Blake Hinson.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we don't need to talk a ton about him. We both wrote a lot about him tonight. You can check that out at post-gazette.com. But I think the big takeaway for me as far as Blake Hinson is concerned was he entered the season with so much hype, Carter. Second team All-ACC preseason. A guy who, you know, they made a big effort to come back. He could have gone pro. But he returned, and we heard about how his game was going to be different, how he was going to be a better leader this year. And I know we're only, 9 games in?
Yeah.
He's fitting that bill so far. He has rose to the occasion. I've been especially impressed with how he's played these last 2 games. That second half against Clemson where he scored 21 of his 27. And then today when Leggett goes out with foul trouble and you're in a hostile atmosphere, things could have got out of hand, but he didn't let that happen, and that's what your star player does. Blake Hinson is my good. Carter, what's – go ahead.
I wanted to just add there, 29 is a career point, a career high for him. I loved your question to him after the game. You were like, you were just putting him up. Were you feeling it? And Blake Hinson, without any hesitation, just says, I'm always feeling it. Yeah. That's who Blake Hinson is. He's a superstar. He's going to be first-team All-ACC if he keeps this up all season. My good, though, was the change of pace in how the offense played. In the first half, 55% of the shots from the guards alone were 3-pointers. That dropped to 33% in the second half. The only 9 of Pitt's 27 total shots in the first half were not 3-pointers. They were just chucking them up, and part of it was because they had to. They felt like that was the plan. Blake Hinson was hitting them, but Bub Carrington wasn't hitting them as much, and I think it started to show because West Virginia was able to get some offensive flow based off of some of the defensive rebounds that they got, and that was being a big question that both you and I were asking ourselves: when is Pitt going to stop taking these threes? And we've seen games before where they've tried to do that all game, and it hasn't worked. That didn't happen this game. I did this in my post-game analysis, but I felt like this was a tale of 2 halves. In the first half, they settled for the outside. Jeff Capel said after Bub settled for one more in the second half, they had a talk, and they said, you got to drive, you got to attack, and you got to generate points or generate opportunities for your teammates. And that's something that they did in the second half. You saw the assists going to the inside. Ishmael Leggett's presence being back was huge for that. I think that's a very good sign for this young team that has young guards. Blake Hinson also saying, see, I told you, they're growing. Because before when we asked them, are they struggling? He said, no, they're learning. This was an example of them learning. And I'll go to the bad part of things here because this wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I think Pitt has a real problem right now with Fede Federico, and that's not saying that he can't get out of it, but he was terrible in this game. He didn't score a single point, only had 1 rebound. And it's fine for Federico if he doesn't he doesn't score a lot, but he was one of the better defensive presences on this team last year, and that has not been a factor in this game in their season so far. In the first 4 games, he was fine. He was averaging like 7.8 points, 7.3 rebounds. That's a fine pace for him. Since then, since they played 5 Power 5 opponents, that has dropped to like less than 4 each, and that is not acceptable from his position. Federico needs to clean things up. What's your bad?
Well, just to build on your point about Federico, too, I mean, I don't want to compare these two because they're 2 different individuals, but it kind of reminds me of what we saw from John Hughley around this time last year, where you're just kind of, everyone else is on, and you're kind of wondering, hey, man, when are you going to get going?
Yeah.
And is there a chance we see them experiment here with a lesser schedule ahead? Maybe they move Guillermo to the starting 5, and they bring Fede off the bench to try to get a little bit of a rhythm going. Yeah. I wouldn't be shocked to see that. But my bad, I'm going to go, and this guy didn't play a bad game at all, but I'm going to go with Ishmael Leggett simply because of the foul trouble. Ish only played 2 minutes or 3 minutes, it rounded up, but it was like less than 3, I believe, in the first half. And that put Pitt in a very peculiar spot that it really hasn't been in this year. And I'm glad it happened against a Power 5 opponent because we truly got to see what they would do. The lineup that they trotted out there was interesting to begin with. They moved Hinson to the 2, Austin to the 3, and brought in Guillermo to play the 4 instead of Jalen Lowe coming out here. And that I thought was interesting. But we talked about, you mentioned how they weren't scoring in the paint until the second half. That's because Ish wasn't on the floor. You look at what he brings to this team. He is the guy who, because of his experience and his age, he's not afraid to go to the basket. He can get others involved, and that's not to say that Carlton Carrington can't do that. But he's still a little hesitant, I think, just because he's so young. So Leggett, and that's not saying, I mean, the technical foul I didn't think need to be called unless
I thought that was the refs asserting themselves, being like,
we're not going to let this game get out of control, which you kind of have to do in a rivalry game. I could see that, but when that happens, you make one other mistake like he did, and you're out of the whole first half, and that could have really wrecked things for Pitt. And it's good to see for them that it didn't, but if you go up against a stronger backcourt, it might.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we need to keep an eye on. It worked against West Virginia, but when you're playing a Duke or a North Carolina or even an NC State or a Clemson again, or a strong ACC team, Leggett's a guy, I would argue, he's probably the one guy you can't get in foul trouble. Even without Hinson, they can figure out a way, but you can't lose that veteran guard. So that was the bad, him getting in foul trouble early. Carter, I'll let you start with the ugly here.
I'll go with the ugly, and it's not about Pitt. It's about West Virginia, and it's nothing against these players. I think they were fighting hard, but you can just see the impact of the program with the loss of Huggins because of the situation that he put himself into and the problems that's brought to the program. This is an environment that was actually really impressive tonight. It was loud. The fans were into it. The Mountaineer fans were bringing it. But as the game wore on, you saw their lack of a bench didn't have much of an answer for anything. You could see that there were just problems as things broke down. Pitt found its chemistry. West Virginia lost theirs, and now they're 3-5. And this is a program that made the tournament last year. Yes, they just had 19 wins. Yes, they didn't have a winning Big 12 record, but they were still a competitive team that I think people around the country respected. And a loss like this, 17 points to Pitt. Yes, Pitt's way high up in the net, but West Virginia was at 209 in their net rankings going into tonight. They're going to drop a lot further now, and I think that's going to continue, and it's very sad to see what a once proud program is at right now.
This isn't a death sentence by any means. I mean, this program has a great athletic department, has a great collective, and I think had Huggins not, got himself fired, they would probably be in a lot better of a spot. I think that some departures wouldn't have occurred, and it also hurts that they're without their best player right now, who's currently suspended. But I totally agree. West Virginia's struggling, and it's only going to get tougher for them as Big 12 play approaches. But my ugly, Carter, as we wrap this up, is just the remaining non-conference slate for Pitt. Yeah. It's kind of a shame that this team's only going to enter conference play with 2 Power 5 wins. Yeah. Because it only had 4 Power 5 opponents.
5, right?
4. Clemson's not a Power 5, or Clemson's it's a conference. Right. So that's what I'm saying. And I think it probably lost to the best 2 Power 5 teams it played. And don't get me wrong, I still think there's something to gain from both of the wins, Oregon State and this one tonight. They weren't great teams, but Pitt blew them out. Yeah. So that should be noted, and that'll bode well for them. But you look, they don't have that Northwestern win like they did last year.
And that could come back to bite.
And that could, it just puts more pressure on them to do well in ACC play. You look, they really don't have any sort of a challenge on their schedule until Syracuse, which is December 30th. So that can be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. It's a good thing where if you're a guy like Fede Federico, this is the time to work out those kinks the month of December, because guess what? Waiting for you in the first week of January is a guy named Armando Bacot, and he's coming for payback because Fede made him look silly the last time they played.
They swept him last
right. So I think that it's going to be, I don't think we'll be doing these post-game recaps after Canisius in South Carolina State. But we'll have these back once we get back into ACC play. But in the meantime, it's going to be a little bit of an ugly slate, not any more challenges, but that can be good for Pitt. Right the wrongs, get the ship all ready to go, because ACC play, once again, Carter, is going to determine if this team goes to the tournament or not. Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. One, I thought the Oakland Zoo's presence here was solid. 50 deep they rolled in with. They were loud, they were proud, and I think they carried themselves very well. That was nice there. Also, another note, ACC went 5-0 tonight. Across the board, big wins across the board, and wins against other Power 5 conferences that were by a distance, 17 points, 19 points. That might also help Pitt in the long run, whereas it doesn't have a win like Northwestern. The ACC being stronger this year might boost its resume up. So if it gets another 24 wins last year, that might count a lot more and get them a lot further than it did last year when they got just a play-in game.
All right, it is 12:37 a.m.
We're driving back.
Our guy Stephen Thompson, on a fellow Pitt beat. I think you ready to go home? Yeah, I am too. For Chris Carter, I'm Noah Hiles. We're signing off, saying hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and keep tuning into the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel for all of our content. This show's brought to you, as always, by our pals at Mike's Beer Bar.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.